to Jocelyn, our host today. And here you go, Jocelyn. Take over and unmute yourself.
Hi everyone. As he said earlier, my name is Jocelyn Min. I'm a rising senior at Amador Valley High School in Pleasanton, California. So I know during this time of COVID-19, everything is constantly changing and adapting to these new ways. And like many of you, you probably have a lot of concerns on how this is going to affect your life, your students' life, and what the future is really going to look like. So I hope today we can clarify some of this and offer you some answers and some guidance. Thank you so much, Alton, for taking his time and speaking with us today. So let's do a little introduction of Alton before we begin.
Hi, sorry, I'm taking over at this point. Hi, Jocelyn. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come and speak. And I know that the coronavirus issues this past year have wreaked a lot of havoc and a lot of confusion on the college admissions landscape. So I'm happy to share a little bit more about what changes you need to be aware of. And I will systematically go through a lot of changes and share a little bit about how students and families might be able to navigate that season. So, maybe lastly, maybe one more thing is that I do a little bit of an introduction of myself on the video, but just to share with you, I'm the CEO of ILUMIN Education, started ILUMIN around 6 years ago, and have been working with high school students with college admissions for the past 10 years. But it's been most certainly a new and challenging environment over the course of this time, and want to share as much as we can about how students and families can respond. So I just want to let you know that I recorded this video 2 days ago, and we will show that video, and then I will come on at the very end and do some question and answer as many questions as we can from as many of you as we can. So I don't know if I just cut off Jocelyn, but if I did, my apologies. And I'll let you take it from here. And then whenever Jocelyn is done, then she can put on the video.
Yeah, no, I think you pretty much covered it. We're excited to see your video.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to come and share a little bit about how the coronavirus is impacting the college admissions landscape. My name is Elton Lin. I'm the CEO and founder of ILUMIN Education, which is a San Francisco Bay Area based college admissions, college counseling firm. And I've personally been working in the college admissions space with high school students for the last 10 years. And I started this company around 6 years ago, and we've seen all sorts of different student cases, definitely top students who have been admitted to top schools and students who have barely graduated, all different kinds of majors and struggles and achievements. But we've never seen anything like a global pandemic impact the landscape the way that it has. And so today my goal is really to share as much as I can about all these different changes, tell you a little bit about how students and parents can better prepare themselves for this coming fall, and hopefully just to ease some of your stress. I know that there's a lot going on, there's a lot of changes, but hopefully I can give you some insight on what things perhaps you need to worry about and what things you don't need to worry about. So let me share a little bit about the agenda for today. I'm going to share, let me move my head down here. I'm going to share a little bit about all the different changes with regards to testing, different decisions that admissions offices have been making and have been going public with. And I just want to make a disclaimer that all this information is as of July 23rd, 2020. So if this presentation gets put up online and there's some changes that are happening after the 23rd, and I haven't included them, then you would know. So this is as of July 23rd. 2020. I'm also going to share a little bit about extracurricular activities. I'm going to share some tips for students, and I'm going to do a Q&A at the very end, answer any questions that you might have, and to clarify any content that I may have shared. So let's get right into it. With regards to the SAT has added a September date. This date does not have access to SAT subject tests, so it's just the SAT. And students with no SAT score have priority registration for the September test and essentially all the early test dates. And that test registration date has already passed. If you were trying to take the SAT and you wanted to register, you probably tried registering that week. There was total chaos. The server died, and there was so much trouble that week with regards to getting your test date. So much inconsistency, and that's a problem, but just want to make note that that can be noted on your college app as well. So the SAT was also working on an at-home online test. And, earlier in the year, they were saying that they were going to try to get it out early, by the 2020 calendar year. But they made an announcement a couple weeks ago that said that at-home online test is going to be put off for the rest of the year. There's too many things happening this year, and we're just going to focus in on trying to get kids into test sittings in person and just focus on that, which I think is wise. I want to make mention of when you really need to get the test in time for this coming fall's college app season. So many of you may understand that there are early deadlines and then regular deadlines. So most of the early deadlines are November 1st, and most of the regular deadlines are January 1st. The UC deadline is November 30th. So if you're trying to get your test scores in time for early decision, early action deadlines November 1st, you need to take the test in August or September. And this way the score comes back in time. There are a good number of schools that will take the October test, but not every school takes the October test. So if you want to make sure that you get the score in time for the early deadlines, you need to take it in August or September. If you for the regular deadlines and for the UCs, they will take test scores all the way through the December test date. So we'll kind of come back and talk about the ramifications of that, but just want to make note of that. For the ACT, there are new test dates added. There's a September 19th, there's an August 10th and October 10th and October 17th. And the signups for this is the last week of July, and nobody knows what day that is. So what you're gonna need to do, if you're watching this presentation before that current week, on Monday, first thing in the morning, you're just gonna wanna check the ACT website, put your name, or maybe this weekend, put your name onto the ACT email list. I have not always gotten emails from the ACT, so I've always taken it upon myself to try to check those websites every single day and potentially multiple times a day, and to make sure that you don't miss the date to sign up. And as you can imagine, everybody in the world is trying to sign up for these SATs and these ACTs. So make sure you watch that, and if you're looking to take the ACT, make sure you pay close attention. The ACT was also trying to launch an online test, and they have intimated that it is unlikely coming in 2020. Similar to the SAT, they will focus on it in 2021, and then we'll see how it goes. They had also planned that there was going to be a section retake. So essentially, there's 4 sections in the ACT, and if you want to take a retake in one of the different sections, you can just take that section and then super score your individual section scores to then become the ACT new composite. But they have also postponed the section retake for this coming fall for 2021. So who knows when it's going to reappear, but they've postponed. Essentially, SAT and ACT has put off all the planned changes that they were expecting to make in 2020 and just focus in on trying to get as many students, as many test dates as possible for this coming fall. So that has been postponed. Just so you know, when you need to get your ACT in for early deadlines, you need to get it in by September. For regular deadlines, you need to get it in by December, and regular deadline and the UCs by December. AP exams. Most of you made it through the AP exam debacle. It was really difficult when you were taking AP Calculus. There's all this mess ups in the very beginning. And so the College Board took a lot of heat for all the AP mishaps. But what's good is that most schools, most universities have said already that they're going to take that AP credit and apply it like any other AP credit. But for a college admissions review, there's a general consensus that your score on the 2020 tests is not equal to a score on a 2019 test or a 2018 test or whatever future test. The reality is that the AP exam was created this year. It's brand new, and it was delivered in a unique way, never really done before. And so this is the reality of that score is really on its own. And the general consensus is that they're not really putting too much too much weight on that AP score. And I also want to make mention in light of that the truth is that, and this has been the case for AP scores for many years, but AP scores are not a significant part of the college admissions review anyways. And so my word to you, students and parents, don't stress out over AP scores. So whatever you got, we had some students who are amazing students who got 2s. I got some students who barely studied and got 5s. So my thing is, like, don't stress about it. Don't worry about it. Everybody understands these AP scores are probably not really that accurate. And so don't stress out about it. All right, some other college adjustments that are happening. Colleges have unilaterally said that they're going to be super flexible this year about testing. So almost every school of note is going test optional this year. And specifically, MIT has gone out to say, we're not only going test optional, we're not even going to look at SAT subject tests. So it's not even test optional for the subject tests. They've said that we're not even going to consider SAT subject tests. So again, the overwhelming majority of schools are going test optional. This has changed even in the last couple of weeks. I interviewed a senior dean of admissions at Emory University, and I interviewed him a month ago, and he said that SATs were still required. But just last week, Emory put out that they are going to go test optional, no longer requiring test scores to be sent in order for them to consider your application. So everybody who is of any consequence, they are all going test optional, so don't stress out about it. As mentioned, going test optional. Some schools are going test blind, and just to make mention of this, test blind versus test optional, if a school is going test optional, it means that they're not requiring the test score for you to submit the application. But if you submit it, they will consider it in the review. If you're going test blind, it means that they won't even consider the score even if you send it. So it's no longer a part of the review rubric, and don't send it. Don't bother sending it over and save your money. So just so you know, most of the top 50 universities are really going test optional, and there are a handful of liberal arts colleges that are going test blind. So you need to check that before you submit the application. And additionally, on the common application, there's going to be a unique box or separate short essay for you to discuss the impact that COVID-19 has had on your specific life. And if you want to, make mention of any sort of peculiarities regarding your situation, then there's a special box for it, and you don't need to include it into the main essay. The big joke among admissions people is that they're going to be reading tons of COVID-19 essays, and the hope of putting in this separate short answer COVID essay is that you would not have to write a COVID-19 essay, and COVID-19 main personal statement for your Common App. So just so you know that that's there. Just some impact on the applicant pool with regards to testing. The reality is that with the lack of opportunity to take tests, there's going to be fewer opportunities for students to, definitely take an SAT or ACT, but definitely fewer opportunities for students to take multiple SATs and ACTs. So on the whole, there's going to be a lower average score across the board. And that also means that if you have a high test score, so if you took it last fall, junior year, and you got a 35 on the ACT or 1530 on the SAT, then yeah, the truth is that score is going to stand out, and it's great. So congratulations to you guys, and yeah, high scores will stand out this year. Focus, maybe another suggestion for you, so focus on the SAT or the ACT, which is if you have the opportunity to take the SAT and ACT, just focus on that. I have a lot of families and students who are worried about SAT subject tests, so my suggestion to you is don't worry about the SAT subject tests. The reality is that every university in the United States understands that it's super hard to get a test date for the SAT or the ACT, and so they just want to make sure you if you got the opportunity to take the SAT, it's great. But if you didn't get the opportunity to take the SAT, you can still apply. And with regards to the subject test, it's far lower in importance. And the trend, as I mentioned before, is that even like MIT is no longer requiring them, and not even going to look at them, even if you send them. So the overarching trend in the United States already is that they are not really considering with great weight SAT subject tests. So if you have an opportunity just to take tests, focus in on the SAT or the ACT, try to get as high of a score as you can, and then submit that. All right, for seniors, and this is seniors who just graduated, not rising seniors. So for seniors who just graduated, just FYI, there's going to be a lot of schools, and this is going to change even over the next couple weeks, but a lot of schools that have put out hybrid class options for this coming fall. They've shortened the semester. A lot of schools have done what they call partial returns. So in other words, they have selected certain classes of students. So for example, like freshman class, Harvard is inviting freshman class students to come to campus next fall, but not inviting sophomore, junior, or senior students to come back, and encouraging them to stay at home and not to come back on the campus. They're also including other students who may need to come, and so they're willing to look at it on a case-by-case basis, but they're doing partial return plans. For other schools, I interviewed an admissions officer from UC Santa Barbara, and they're doing a full return on campus, but 80% of their classes are online. So as you can imagine, every school is sort of doing their own version of their plan to try to make it doable for their students. Other schools in person, so they're giving students the choice of whether they want to come back on campus or do everything remotely. Boston University and Northeastern are giving this option, and essentially almost the majority of their classes have both an in-person or online component, and it's up to you and your choice of what you want to do. And the CSUs are going fully online. But as I do the summary, I'm just going to want to make note that there's going to be a lot of changes over the next couple weeks. You just need to watch and pay attention and make note of that. And I think definitely the overarching trend is going to be that everyone is going to go fully online, and they're going to want to encourage students to stay home. International students, a lot of changes that just happened as of today. Harvard and USC is actually telling their first-year international students not to come to the US. Big changes happening just today, breaking news. And what's happening with that is that that is in reflection with the US immigration on giving visas to international students. As you probably have heard, like a week ago, they were about to not honor visas for international students if universities were to go completely online. They revoked that. However, the rule that was left in the immigration changes as of March were that first-year freshman students who are just coming to US for the first time would not be given a visa if the university was doing the majority of their courses online. So Harvard and USC are working on this. They are in the midst of different lawsuits against US immigration, but they realize that they cannot, they probably won't be able to make changes in time for the fall. So Harvard and USC has already sent out a message to all their first-year international students: don't come to the US, stay home, work remotely, and also consider deferral, and we'll honor that deferral. So a lot of changes with international students, and if Harvard and USC is doing it today, then likely more schools will come along over the next couple weeks. All right, more news for seniors. Again, graduating seniors, not rising seniors. There's going to be more gap requests. So gap semester or gap year. So you can request a gap year or you can request a gap quarter or gap semester. So it depends on the school that you are planning to go to, but there's more of those kinds of requests that are going to happen. If you do the gap year, you can't apply to other schools or attend other schools, and I can get into the details as to why, but the bottom line is that if the school is going to save a space for you, they're going to assume that you're going to honor that request and come to school with them the following year. And the reality is that if you are a graduating senior right now, then you need to be flexible. Things are going to be changing over the course of the next month, next 6 to 8 weeks, and you're just going to have to hang tight and be flexible and have good conversations with your parents. All right. So for juniors, or what I would consider rising seniors, you guys need to work hard first semester senior year. So I mean, if you can imagine, your second semester junior year grades are pass, no pass for the overwhelming majority of U.S. high schools. And essentially, it's just a black hole on your transcript. College admissions reviewers are going to look at that, and it's not going to be there. So they're going to want to see your first semester senior year grades. And the trend right now, like Princeton, for example, and I'll come back and talk about this a little bit later, but Princeton shifted their early deadline to the regular deadline. So they actually essentially got rid of the early deadline, and they're just going to review applications on January 1st. And the reality is that they want to see first year senior grades. So if you're a rising senior, you need to work hard this fall and make sure that you get as good of a grades as you can and demonstrate to schools that you can handle a college level workload. You need to sign up for the SAT, ACT Fast. Again, the SAT is already passed. ACT is coming this coming week, so you need to sign up fast, stay on the websites, make sure you get a test date if that's what you're looking to take. And you need to find other ways to demonstrate interest. If you all are familiar with this term demonstrated interest, it is the student's ability or a student's sort of demonstration to the school that they are interested in coming. And not every school measures demonstrated interest, but certainly a lot of schools do. And they are trying to get a sense of how likely you are to come to the school. So normal demonstrated interest measurements could be you attending, you visiting the campus, flying out to visit a school, you attending a school event where the school's admissions rep is coming to your school. You may be, or reaching out to an admissions officer, attending a local event. But if you can't attend physical events anymore, then how are you going to do it? And so more and more universities are doing college virtual visits. So if you're a rising senior, you're going to want to touch base with as many schools as you can virtually. So get onto their websites, jump into virtual sessions and meetings, learn about the school, and make sure they have your email and you use the email that you're going to use for your college app, and make sure that you're on their radar with regards to your interest in that school. So we need to find different ways to demonstrate interest. And on that link, there are a sea of different websites where you can do college virtual visits. So the more demonstrated interests you can do, the better. All right, so some potential trends that are going to be happening for this coming season. There's going to be a ton of waitlist used. So this is where, because it's so hard to predict whether students are actually going to come, schools will need to use the waitlist more. So they're going to end up putting more students on the waitlist, not giving them a decision, but just saying, we're not going to reject you or accept you. We're just going to put you on the waitlist. And if we have space, then we'll start pulling people off the waitlist. So you're going to see a lot of waitlist use over the coming year. It's already been used a lot for this past season, and it's going to be that much more. There's going to be more students who are staying closer to home. I've already seen that trend with our own students, families who don't want their kids to go across the United States, want to stay in California, and that trend is going to be happening all over the United States. There's going to be fewer international students coming, as we just mentioned. There was, with the immigration issues and the lack of access to a visa, there's going to be fewer international students admitted and attending U.S. universities over the next couple of years. That may change. I don't believe that the value of the U.S. education is going to go down, but in the next couple of years, there's going to be less international students, no question. And more students are going to be opting for the gap year. And let me move my head over here. And then additionally, as you may have noticed, even Stanford dropped a whole slew of varsity sports. And the reality is that Division I schools across the United States are putting their sports programs on a hiatus or cutting them entirely. And what's going to happen with those normal recruits is those spaces are going to be reallocated to the regular admit pool. So hopefully it's going to increase the admit rates a little bit, not a ton, but a little bit, and create more space for other students who want to come this fall. As mentioned, more UCs will ask for senior year grades. Just so you know, the UCs normally don't factor in senior year grades, but on occasion, depending on the circumstance, the UCs will request that you send them their first semester grades. My sense is that the UCs will ask for senior grades a lot more for this coming year. So work hard, rising seniors. And then changing ED and EA deadlines. I mentioned about Princeton. Princeton got rid of their early deadline and pushed everything to the regular deadline. Georgia Tech instituted a second early action just for out-of-state students. So there's going to be more changing ED and EA deadlines. And the importance of early decision is going to increase. I just want to make mention, if you can imagine, just to describe early decision is when you apply early decision and they admit you, you have to go. And what it does for the university is that it locks those students in, and the university can count on their tuition revenue for the coming year. So if you can imagine, every university in the United States is going through a budget crisis. Harvard senior administrators took a 25% pay cut this year. So if Harvard is having a budget crisis, then everybody is having a budget crisis. So if you can apply early decision this year and essentially lock in tuition revenue for them for 2021, they're definitely going to be looking at it. So if you're a rising junior and you're considering applying early decision this year, this is a year to apply early decision. And of course, you need to, it's an exchange for, you may not be able to apply to more schools. If you get in, you have to go. But if you're considering early decision, then this is the right year to consider it. All right, so other potential trends, GP and test scores still matter. So, but I do feel like, again, as I mentioned before, every school is aware of all the different changes that are happening. Even though GPA and test scores still matter, but the importance of course rigor will go up. And what I mean by course rigor is the number of APs and community college courses you are taking to demonstrate to colleges that you can handle a college level workload. So if, in lieu of having a slew of grades and perhaps a really high test score, they're going to be looking at the number of APs you're taking, and just to see whether you are challenging yourself academically, to make sure by the time you land on the college campus, you'll be able to handle a college level workload. So course rigor is going to be more important. Your essays are going to be more important. Again, if they lack information in other areas, they're going to be looking for more information in other areas. So that includes your essays to communicate your story. Recommendations and interviews, I believe, will go up in importance as well. To be frank with you, interviews were really negligible in the college admissions review process. But again, since there's a lack of information, some of these other peripheral information vehicles are going to be a little bit more important. And as mentioned, early decision is going to be much more important this year as well. All right, let me talk a little bit about extracurricular activities. Again, a lot of you, your summer programs dropped, your internships didn't come through, a lot of things happen. So colleges will understand the summer of 2020. Don't be overly stressed about it. 250 colleges, including all the Ivies, put out a joint statement, a public statement to encourage students to not stress out about this past summer's activities. So don't overstress it. If you don't have the traditional research things or the competition things, it's fine. Nobody has it. So really it's not that big of a deal. However, oops, let me get back on track here. However, there is still this question that's going to linger with every college admissions reviewer, which is, what have you done with your time? Like you had all this extra time this summer. Like, what did you do? And so let me encourage you. I mean, this is perhaps the message I was giving at the beginning of the summer with this slide. But it's still middle of July, and there's still time, and you're still going into the rest of the semester. Still find ways to give back. You know, whether it's groceries for seniors, a lot of students were sewing masks early on in the shelter in place. There's lots of different problems that are arising in our societies. Like, how can you participate in giving back to your community? Maybe your family situation is that you need to help your family, or you need to support your siblings. Maybe you're the oldest sibling, you got 3 younger siblings, both your parents work, and the reality is that you need to take care of these 3 other siblings. That's totally fine. Take care of them. Maybe you're running a summer program just for your 2 brothers and 1 younger sister. Maybe you're doing geometry preview for them. Whatever it is, you need to help your family and support your brothers and sisters. And you certainly can write that into the college app. So make sure they know about it. So if you need to help your family, please do so. Work on meaningful projects. I mean, if you have time to, you want to write your novel, you want to work on a research thesis, whatever it is, this is the time to work on those meaningful projects. And as hearkened on earlier in the slide, solve problems. And there's all sorts of different problems that are happening in our communities. Figure out a way to solve a problem. And I want to take an opportunity to brag a little bit about a couple of our students. Early on in the shelter-in-place period in March, a couple of our students came to us and said, we really want to do something about what's happening with all these students who are locked into their homes. These students started an online peer-to-peer tutoring network where they connected high school student volunteers, tutors, to students all over, regardless of what age, all over the United States and the world. In 24 hours, they recruited 50 tutors. In a week, they recruited over 200 tutors. As of today, they've done over 1,200 tutoring sessions. They've worked with 450 students, and they have a branch office in Greece, Dubai, Taiwan, and there's a 4th location, but I can't remember. And they've just ran with something that like a problem that they saw early in this shelter-in-place process. They ran with it, worked on it super hard, and they've helped so many people by developing this online platform. And so if you need a tutor, go to quarantutors.com. All right, so other things you can do. There's opportunities for digital and remote volunteering. You can certainly look, here's a few examples. The United Nations is looking for volunteers. There's an organization called Zooniverse, which is an open source research platform where students can go on to research projects that are happening all over the world and volunteer their time to help with these research projects. Rock to Vote is a voter registration campaign, especially for 2020. This election is crazy, and if you want to participate in the voting process, you should go on to Rock to Vote. Smithsonian Institute is looking for online volunteers. We have our own bank of online volunteering that we can share with you, but this is just a sample. You can certainly take classes too. It's becoming a little bit late in the summer to take 4-credit classes, so I'll mention that in a second. But you can certainly take classes on any of these online platforms, edX, Coursera, Udemy, Skillshare, and explore whatever it is that you want. So take the opportunity, use the time to really explore something you're really curious about. And for classes for credit, there's online high schools, BYU Online, UC Scout, Laurel Springs. And for BYU Online specifically, you can start classes anytime. So you can take any number of different AP classes on BYU Online, UC Scout, Laurel Springs. For community college classes, you need to work on the semester schedule or whatever the academic schedule that they're on. So you won't be able to jump into classes right at this moment, but you can for this coming fall. So if you want to use your extra time and take extra classes, that would be terrific. And as I mentioned before, earlier in the presentation, course rigor is going to be more important. So if you can find maybe another AP class to take just to beef up your course rigor, then this is a way to do it. Independent projects. It's a good time if you have extra time to work on projects that are self-driven by you. So perform science experiments on sciencebuddies.com. They coach you on how to run your own science fair project at home. And if you work on something this summer, you can prepare to submit your work in time for the Intel Regional Fair synopsis at the end of the year. So this is a good time to work on any kind of science fair projects. You can start a blog or a YouTube. I have a student who is learning how to play the trombone and just doing a video blog on her experience of being an older student, older person meaning like 17, but an older person trying to learn how to play an instrument from scratch. And it's really interesting. And learn new skills and document it, as I mentioned, with regards to the blog and the YouTube channel. And solve real-world problems, as mentioned, as exampled by the Corn Tutors, as I mentioned earlier. Sample independent projects. You can certainly develop your own iPhone app. Start an experimental garden. We have a student who is trying to do some hybrid vegetables in his backyard, and he is getting it all set up and again documenting it with a blog and sharing all his insights on how he's combining, corn and tomatoes and trying to combining vegetables to kind of create some kind of hybrid experience. So he's working on that this summer. Write a novel and get it published. It's actually much easier than you think it is, especially with Amazon and other online publishing venues. If you want to write a book, this is the time to work on it and get it published. And you can start a free tutoring program like corntutors.com. Final thought for you is challenge yourself academically. You don't have access to all the different extracurricular activities that you might normally be working on. With school starting mostly online, who knows about sports or clubs or anything else that might normally be at school. So in lieu of all that time, all those activities, use the time to challenge yourself academically. So whether it's taking another class or perhaps another AP class or another college, community college course, challenge yourself academically. Don't overstress about testing. If you can't get the test sitting that you want, if you put it on your college application and make note that you were not able to get a test seating, that's totally understandable. Everybody is understanding of what's happening in 2020. So don't overstress about testing and make the best use of your time. I think at the beginning of the summer, there was definitely, I hear of students who were just enjoying all the free time and just playing a lot of video games. You can play some video games, don't play that many video games. So my thing is that make the best use of your time, work on projects, explore your curiosities, do some more reading, work on SAT prep, whatever it is, make the best use of your time. And lastly, find a way to make a difference. Find a way to give back. There are so many opportunities in our communities for you to bring change. And, so many hurting people, so many people shut in, a lot of emotional health issues, let alone financial issues that are plaguing families all across the United States. Explore what these problems are and find a way to make a difference. Give back, raise money, volunteer, develop your own solution, but find a way to make a difference. I'm going to go over some common questions that I have been getting with regards to some of these presentations we've been doing. And a common question is, should I go to school this fall? So if you are a graduating senior and you don't know whether you should go back to school this fall, my quick answer to should I go back to school is, I don't know. It depends. And so, but what I hear has been happening is that there's been so many stressful conversations at home. And what I want to encourage parents and students to do is be very open about how you feel and communicate, over-communicate what you're feeling and what is happening. For parents, I just want you to know that your graduating senior is a full-fledged adult. They worked very hard to get into the school that they are going to, and they're excited about going to that school. And because, they've worked very hard. They're mature adults now, and so give your graduating senior an opportunity to really participate in the decision process, and have frank conversations. For students, for graduating seniors, be reminded that you are your parents' most prized possession. So if they don't want you, if they don't want to send you to a COVID hotbed in Florida or Texas, I mean, you can understand that. So be sympathetic to how your parents are feeling about sending you across the United States to go to college. So let me encourage you to have open conversations, have adult, mature conversations, and make the best decision you can. Should I still prepare for the SAT or the ACT? In my opinion, if you're a rising 11th or rising 12th grade student, if you have the opportunity to take the SAT or the ACT, you should take it. And even schools are going test optional, they're still going to look at it they're still going to look at it if you submit it. So if you take the SAT, if you plan on taking the SAT and you get a good score, then it will be a value add to your application. So for the overwhelming majority of students, you should still prepare for the SAT or the ACT and work on it. And if you get a good score, then it's an asset to you. And if you don't get a good score, then you can not submit it. And the test optional situation is to your benefit. How might top students stand out? So I think I made mention of this throughout the presentation. More AP, more AP classes. I don't want to get into this game where you're trying to count how many AP classes you're taking, and that you have to sort of overload your schedule and then go to sleep at 3 a.m. and live a very unhealthy life. I am not for that kind of planning. However, if you have extra time, again, spared from not being involved in other types of activities, then perhaps consider taking another class at a community college, another AP class, etc. But if you have the opportunity to really work on an independent research project, an independent venture like Corn Tutors, or whatever it is, this is a great opportunity to do that because, again, there's so many problems, you have more free time, and it's a great opportunity for you to develop a solution that impacts a lot of people and thus will help you stand out. How will the application process be different this year? Technically, and we've been interviewing admissions officers for the last 6 weeks. We interviewed Emory, UC Santa Barbara, Pomona College. Coming up is Boston University, Case Western. So if you want to watch those videos, go to our website at illumineducation.com. I've asked everybody this question: how will the application process change? They said it really won't change. And I believe them to a degree, in the sense where the review process doesn't really change, but the student pool does change. And so that's where they need to reassess their internal processes to anticipate students who don't have spring second semester junior year grades, lower overall average test scores, and what those pieces of information tell about the students. So they're going to have to adjust their bars, but the overall process actually doesn't change. They're still looking at academic performance, your resume. If you have test scores to submit, they'll look at it. And the question that they're still asking is, will this student be successful once the student lands on campus the following year? In closing, I just want to say thank you so much again for giving me the opportunity to share a little bit more about the college admissions landscape. Hopefully what I shared helped reduce some of your stress and anxiety and helped students focus in on the things that really matter for this coming fall. And if there's any need for this, my information is there. You can certainly reach out to me. But thank you again, and look forward to jumping into Q&A right now. Thanks again.
Okay, thank you so much for that video, Elton. At this time, we're going to open it up to questions. So in the next few minutes, we'll give everyone some time. Just type your questions into the chat box and we'll do our best to answer as much as we can. So while we wait for people to send us in some questions, I actually have some questions myself. So as a rising senior, what are the best things I can do right now to kind of raise my chances and set myself apart?
Yeah, as I mentioned in the probably a couple slides earlier from the video, I think there are a lot of limitations. So you can't, you can't go into the normal type of activities that most people are doing right now. And I do believe, as I mentioned, that course rigor is going to be more important. Again, the overriding question that is going through every admissions reviewer's mind is that, is this student going to be able to handle the college level curriculum, college level workload by the time they arrive on campus? And so in lieu of having a lot of grades that really tell that story, how might you do that? And then being able to take challenging courses, AP level courses, community college classes. And if you can certainly beef up your schedule this year, that would be helpful. And certainly there's other creative ways, and certainly we've had some of our students employ their own creative ways of trying to solve different problems in their community. And if students can do that, certainly that will be a value add as well. So.
Nice. So in your school, what if there aren't any more AP classes that you can take or sign up for, the classes are full or something? Would online be a better option?
Yeah, this is where online, you really don't have that many more options, but the high schools, at least the ones that I mentioned on the presentation, and there are more around the United States, but these are accredited online high schools. And so if you can imagine where, if the question of where do teenage movie stars go to high school, they go to online high schools. So these are real and they do offer real credit. The ones that I mentioned on the slide are also University of California accredited online high schools. So if you wanted to go onto them and find AP courses that you want to take, I do want to make note that AP lab science classes are not accredited online. So if you really want sort of max impact, I would look at AP courses, but non-lab science AP courses. So AP psychology, any of the AP, like AP European history, world history, any of the, social sciences, math is totally fine. So that's where I would go for online AP high school courses.
Okay, so we got a question. Do schools super score for ACT and SAT?
Yeah, so every school has a little bit of a different approach on their super scoring. And then you can actually download this monster document on the College Board as far as like which schools do exactly what. But generally speaking, a good majority of schools do super score the SAT. On record, the ACT is not supposed to be super scored. And when I mean super score for the ACT, it means picking out which section on different sittings and then using them to do a different composite score. But prior to this year, there's been a growing trend for a lot of the top 50 universities to do that. So they've been informally doing that in order to sort of equalize the playing field between measuring the SAT and the ACT. So generally speaking, a lot of schools do. And if you have the opportunity to take multiple test sittings and have multiple scores in order for them to be super scored, then good job. But there's a lot of students this coming season who will not have more than one test score. So in that sense, it's not going to be as critical of an issue.
Thank you. Okay, so for what about like SAT and ACT, the ones from this year and the ones from last year, are they going to be scored and looked at the same?
Yeah, they should. The actual test is not any different. So whether you took it in 2019 or 2020, it's really inconsequential. You still, if you have an opportunity to take the SAT or the ACT, you want to focus in on getting the high score you can. And as mentioned, this is not part of your question, but I would not overstress about subject tests or AP test scores. But yeah, 2019, 2020, whether you got the score then or now, it's really inconsequential.
Thank you. So our next question is, will Proposition 16 affect college admissions for 2021?
Yeah, if you're referring to affirmative action. Yeah, so there's certainly, I can imagine that a lot of the audience are representative of Asian American backgrounds and totally understand the concern that reintroducing affirmative action might have on the admissions trends. If I'm going to be very honest with you, I think the biggest impact that it is going to have on Asian Americans is likely among lower income Asian Americans. And the reality is that when affirmative action if it does get eventually passed and goes all the way through and gets implemented into the admissions process, the The way it is administered is that scholarship funding is then reallocated to students from ethnic backgrounds that are underrepresented. So I know this is sort of a bit of whether it's good or bad, but the reality is that if you're a full tuition paying student, it is likely going to impact you much, if at all. But if you are in greater need of financial aid and you are of Asian American background, the affirmative action proposition may impact you.
Thank you. So what about the schools with test optional? Does it really mean optional? Kind of like, yes, it's optional, but it's like highly recommend you send it in. What do you have to say?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think every school has, I mean, if you go onto every website and of every one of these universities, everyone's made a statement. And having interviewed quite a few admissions officers over the past 6 weeks, and everyone's really saying the same thing. They really are sensitive to the fact that not every student gets an opportunity to take the SAT or the ACT. So test optional does mean test optional. So if you want to go back, I mean, I kind of grilled the UC Santa Barbara guy like maybe about a month ago on this. So if you're going to want to go back to our website, watch the video on it. I think it's around the 8-minute mark on that video, but he repeatedly said that test optional is test optional. So on their internal rubric, there are typically 13 parts of that review rubric. And if they remove one, it just means that there's 10 parts of that rubric and that's it. So it's not sort of an X on the 13th one or a big black hole on the 13th one. What it is that it's just, it's neither hurts you nor helps you. It just gets removed out of the rubric. And then we focus on the other 12 items. And so, for this year, test optional is test optional. But if I'm gonna be very honest, we need to see what next year's class. So if you're a rising junior, if you're applying in next year, what the landscape is and whether that will be the case for next year. But if you're a rising senior, test optional does mean test optional.
Right. So because a lot of these different categories of a normal common application is taken out, what do you think would say now is like the most important part of your application?
Yeah, I think I may have mentioned this earlier in the video, and I think what I think is really the more critical things are certainly like a course rigor. So, and it goes back to this singular question that most admissions people are asking, which is, will this student be able to handle college level workload? And the reason why that question is so important is because there are internal metrics for the university that are very important to them. So graduation rate is very important to them. Being able, like how many resources they need to allocate in order, whether it's on-campus tutoring, on-campus emotional support, that all requires funding. And so if they're less sure about whether a student can be able to kind of make it through all 4 years of college, they need to allocate more funding in that area. And it also impacts their overall metrics. So they're very concerned about whether a student can handle a college level workload. And so certainly taking a more difficult course load will help and send the right message. But I wouldn't, there is not like one extracurricular activity or if I do feel like normally on a normal year, I would say like the sort of top 10% threshold on students who are applying in the top schools is probably around a 1530 or 1540 on the SAT. I do think that's going to lower a little bit. And because again, not as many students are going to have multiple opportunities to take the SAT or the ACT. So they're going to have to factor in some of those changes. So I spoke with Pomona College last week, and they were testing the adjustments on how to review test scores. And so they're making all those adjustments this summer. They know that it will be lower. And so I don't want students to, really get overly nervous about the determination of their, how their test score will really determine their, overall results. So there will be a lot of consideration for those test results. And so, get good grades, take hard classes and keep going.
It's definitely very reassuring.
I hope so, especially for you, Jocelyn.
Yeah. Okay. Someone wants you to talk more about the effects that it might have on ED schools and whether they'll have a better chance next year and which of those kind of fit into that category.
Yeah, I mentioned that earlier in the presentation as well. I think if you are interested in doing early decision at all, this is the year to do it. So my big sort of point around that is that most universities in the United States are going through budget issues, and early decision secures tuition revenue for the university. So if you do ED, you're admitted, you lock in that dollar amount for the university for 2021. It's a big deal. So this is where trying to figure out what those options are for you, I think, is important. So if you want to apply ED this year, it's a good year to apply. Now, which schools for which students is a completely different question, and it just depends on the students. So 2.5 students shouldn't be applying to University of Pennsylvania on early decision, and that's not gonna make a difference, obviously. So there needs to be the appropriate student applying into the appropriate bracket of early decision schools, and if you do, then early decision will definitely have more of an impact. It's impossible to say what sort of increase in percentage it will be. There's certainly schools that have sort of a higher differential between the regular and early decision percentages. Like Johns Hopkins typically has a pretty good differential between regular and early decision, but you have to look at it on a specific individual student case-by-case basis.
Yeah, and I know you said earlier in your presentation how now it's hard for us to show as much interest because we can't go on these college tours. So other than really going on the college website, what's a good way we can find out more about like the campus life?
Yeah, certainly can. So a lot of universities are trying to, you can reach out to admissions people. So this is where, like, number one, you can go onto their website. There normally is a specific, if the audience is from, say, Northern California, there is a specific admissions representative who manages Northern California, and you're gonna wanna reach out to that person. That is a way to demonstrate interest at that school and sort of reach out to them, show some interest. And more universities are trying to connect you with students who are currently attending the school. So you can certainly request to that admissions person, might I be able to be connected to a student at that university? And more often than not, they're more than willing. Remember, once they accept you, they want you to come. So they are also motivated to want to help you learn more about the school. And so I think that would be the most direct way. And on some level, you would kind of get some credit for it.
Yeah, great. Okay, so what about in terms of student activity? Like you said earlier in the presentation, a lot of programs such as sports, internships got canceled. So what are like the best activities that students can do right now, and where's a good place we can really look for those activities?
Yeah, best activities is different for every student, right? So I mean, I think this is where there are so many, like, those students who are like a part of like the like math competitions and computing competitions. A lot of those things got canceled or postponed, and it is what it is. So this is where there are certainly summer programs and or different things out there that have gone online, and there are more options online, but not a ton. So my thing is that students need to be creative with how they explore their interests. So as mentioned, there are online course purveyors, whether it's for-credit courses or edX or Coursera or those kind of things, and you need to find your own way to do that. And so potentially this is also where, if students can get other students to work on projects together, if I mentioned earlier about working on like your own science fair project, and this is a really great time to do that. You can do, I think it's a misnomer that science fair research projects need to be done in a lab or on a university campus. I had a student, one of my personal students, was one of the first place winners in the 2019 synopsis, and he did everything out of his kitchen. So this is where students can certainly do things on their own. Science Buddies gives a step-by-step process on how you can run your own research project at home. And so, so there are opportunities to do things, but students do need to, go out there and be a little bit more creative, that's for sure.
With all this extra time, might as well put it at use.
Indeed, Jocelyn, indeed. So.
Okay, so what about for college applications? If, say, a student has really good grades academically, but they didn't do well on their ACT or SAT, should they still send that score?
It's entirely dependent on which school you're applying to. So I think that the score needs to be an asset for the student before you send it in. So thankfully with test optional, you can decide. So, I mean, this is where, you know, prior to this year, there were a ton of schools that required test scores still, and you had to send them in regardless of whether you wanted to or not. So, but this year you have the option. So it really depends on which school and what you're applying to. So I think maybe one way to sort of understand this is that most high schools, not every high school, but a lot of high schools use Naviance. And what you can do is that you can go onto your Naviance, say, for example, like, I think I remember seeing like for, you know, Monte Vista High School, Cupertino, I think average entry test score for UC San Diego was a 1530. And so if you're anywhere near the 1530, if you're, you know, if you're sort of within maybe, you know, 10 or, you know, 20 or 30 points, that's probably neutral. And if you're, say, like more than 100 points below, it may not be a value add. And so, and you may want to consider not sending it. So I would begin first with your high school's admission trend data, which is mostly stored on Naviance or Score. Some schools use Score. And then that'll give you a benchmark as to whether to send it in or not.
Okay, great. So during the year, once everything starts opening up again and we can start doing more things, would you say a volunteer job is better than a paying job during the year?
I think that's a tough one because I feel like it's very contextual. I do feel like both have value, and certainly if it's a tutoring opportunity, sharing your area of expertise with other students is terrific. So I would definitely encourage students to do that. I do think paying jobs is very underrated. So I feel like there's not that many high school students who have working jobs where people actually pay them to do something, and it could be something as rudimentary as working at a tea shop or anything, you know, less rudimentary than that. But I think part-time jobs is very underrated. And if you're looking on the admissions reviewer side, if a student is in a working job, the assumption is that they have to make sure they show up on time, do good work. If they're not doing good work, they're going to get fired. So that sense of responsibility and a student being able to manage a part-time job for a period of time is a positive thing. That's for sure. So I don't want to say there's no sort of like tutoring is better than part-time job or vice versa. It is a little bit consequential or contextual, but both have value.
Okay. So for the test optional schools, will a student that sends in their scores have a higher chance or not really?
Yeah, so this is where every school, and I did discuss this with Pomona College senior admissions person, and so everybody wants to be super super understanding of the whole test situation this year. So everybody is saying that they're not going, if you don't send in a test score, like it's not going to be factored negatively against you. And so, and there is some predictive modeling that some admissions people have been purporting that there's going to be a large percentage of students who don't send in test scores this year. So I do feel like if you're a rising senior and you took the SAT fall of 2019 and you got a 1540, I do feel like it's probably going to be a good addition to your profile. But this is where I think there's going to be quite a few students who don't submit tests, and they're going to, it's not like, you know, like if you have a test, then they're only going to look at those students. So they are going to do their best to factor all these things in fairly. And I think for 2020, if you're applying in for 2020, then I do think admissions people are going to be as fair as they can with regards to how they review the students. So.
Okay. So someone says, my test score didn't come out too well. Are AP test scores from 2020 valued the same as 2019 scores? / what should I do? I remember you said that the new AP exams are now very different because it's now structured very differently because it was totally reformatted to be able to be done at home. But for someone whose scores weren't as good as they hoped they could be, what's something you can do to kind of make up for that?
Yeah, so I feel like AP scores, because once the scores came out, there was a lot of there was a fair amount of uproar nationally, and I think there was enough uproar to signal to admissions reviewers that, you know, like this was not a normal test. This is the first time they've done this type of test, and we're really not going to put too much weight onto it. But I also want to make mention, and just make mention of this again, as I did in the presentation. AP test scores were not significantly factored into any admissions review across the United States. And so even for the UC rubric, AP scores are not factored in. And the sort of, the way I sort of try to communicate this to families as well is that you know, normally on a normal year, schools require you to submit test scores in, and they only require you to submit the SAT or SAT subject test. They never require you to submit the AP scores in. So the AP scores historically have not been factored in. So I think going back to the original question, which is, you know, maybe the SAT or the ACT did not turn out quite as well as you'd like. I think the bigger thing is, if you have an opportunity to take it this fall, then I would practice and do the best that you can. And if it's not quite the score that you want, then I would consider not submitting them. And if this is for those students who maybe are struggling to get the score that you want. I mean, this may be a good situation for you, where I do believe that schools who are going test optional are genuinely going test optional. So this is where it's like, you can certainly not submit this year, and they're not going to think twice about it. So.
Okay. So how many AP classes in general would you say is a good way to demonstrate your academic rigor?
I know this is a hard question to ask, and this is where it's like if I land on sort of one specific number, it's really difficult. But I do feel like, generally speaking, if you're at your particular school, if you're aiming at top 20 to 25 universities, you're going to want to take basically the hardest load you can take. And so not every school is the same. So I mean, some schools, Crystal Springs has no AP classes, and other schools have a lot of AP classes. And so it's different for every high school. So if you're aiming at top 20 or 25 schools, you're going to want to take, in most cases, the hardest load you can. And maybe it is, you know, maybe it's one less AP or you know, junior year or senior year, but you want to take, you know, as difficult as you can while still maintaining as close to straight A's as you can. So if you end up taking the most difficult level and you get straight C's, that's not going to help you. So you want to take the most difficult level you can by maintaining as close to straight A's as you can. And the specifics will probably be dependent on the student and the school.
Right. Would you say it also kind of depends on how many APs is offered by that school? Does that factor into it?
No question. So as mentioned earlier, every high school offers a different number of APs. And as mentioned, Crystal Springs offers 0, and other schools offer many. So it totally depends. And it certainly depends on how the school curriculum lays out the lane. So some, you know, there's a percentage of high schools in the Bay Area that require students to take Calculus AB before BC, and other schools that don't make the requirements. So it really is, you don't need to worry too much about what other students are doing at other schools, but you do need to be aware of what top students are doing at your school, and be aware of what they're taking. So.
Right. So I know some schools actually don't offer any weighted classes at all. So when college admissions is looking at this, how will like their GPA kind of compare and be looked at?
Yeah, so you really cannot compare students from one high school to the other high school, because curriculums are different, teachers are different, environments different. So so I wouldn't overly stress about, you know, like again, from one to the other. If your school does not offer any APs or honors classes, there are in most cases still you know, a way to take a more difficult course. So whether it is like, say, you know, if it's not calculus A, B, or B, C, they're still offering calculus, and taking calculus is still more difficult than taking pre-calculus, right? So this is where students who can still advance to as far as they can on their school's curriculum is still going to be shown well for admissions reviewers. And additionally, if you're doing well and you're nearer to the top of the class, then your counselor and your teacher recs will also reflect that. So
nice. Okay, and for the AP classes, would you say it's better for a student, like kind of how should we take this? Either take an AP class and risk getting a worse grade, or go the safe route and get a higher grade? So what would you recommend when choosing this course rigor?
yeah, it's super tough to kind of give a precise answer to that because it's very contextual, right? So I'd still kind of come back to the organizing principle of trying to keep as close to straight A's and taking as difficult a course load as you can. And so if taking, you know, an extra AP means that you get like 3 B's and 3 A's, that's probably not where you want to be. So I think if you can take a heavier load and maybe maintain 1 B in that profile, I think that's probably worth it to take a more difficult load. But understood that not every student is in that position. And if you're maybe struggling to get, you know, above a 3.5 in general, then trying to take courses in order to get more A's will be better in that situation.
Okay. So someone asked, will applying to financial aid affect college admissions process?
Yeah, that's hard. I mean, that's there's not the most precise response to that, in part because universities have not been precise in their communication about it. So one part of it is that, like, you know, there's the term called like need blind and need aware. And so if you're need blind, so for example, there was somebody who made extravagant donation to Johns Hopkins 2 years ago and essentially helped Johns Hopkins become entirely need blind. So they're not worried about like what background you have. They're confident that they can provide any kind of financial aid if you need it. They're just looking whether a student is a good fit for that school. But the reality is that not that many schools are purely need blind, and most schools are very need aware. And I would say they're extra need aware in light of 2020. And so this is where, if I can be frank with you, I think there probably is some impact to filing for financial aid in the admissions review process, but I can't say that it is like significant. And so this is where I think you need to think, there's multiple issues that are going on here, whether it is important for the family to be able to access financial aid in order to really make sure that when students graduate, they're not graduating with debt. And so this is where I would, you know, if the difference between submitting that financial aid form and graduating with, like, say, 100K in debt, or finishing school with no debt, I would finish school with no debt. And so this is where, you know, there's other factors that are at play, but in short, I do feel like there is some impact, but it's really hard to determine like how much impact that is on the admission review, and it's dependent on school by school basis.
Okay. So do you see more students taking this community college route this year, and is it a good strategy?
It depends what the community college route means. I mean, if the community college route means is taking like an extra class, yeah, I do see it for sure. So this is where I think students have the opportunity to take a college level course, and maybe they have a wider choice of courses they can access, and that is helpful for a lot of students. And so if it fits the student's schedule and they are able to do so, then I think it's a good idea.
So kind of going back to these extracurriculars, what can the student athletes do this year?
That's a good one. That's tough. And I feel like student athletes, here's my thing on student athletes. I think if you are in the recruitment pathway and you're trying to get recruited Division I or Division III, I think it's a tough process for you. And many universities are putting their sports programs on hold and allocating less resources for recruitment. So I just want to, all those aspiring Division I athletes, it's a tough year. So I'm sorry, and that's a part of it. And for other athletes, I feel sad for you as well. I mean, I agree with you because sports is fun and it's important for your life, and there's a lot of learning and leadership that goes along with it. But sports is going to be impacted greatly this year, and so you are going to recapture some of that time. So I mean, if you're thinking about athletes spending anywhere between 10, 15, even 20 hours a week on your sport, you're going to recruit that time back. And so this is where you need to be creative with what you do with your time. And so whether that is taking extra courses, or we need to wait to see how high schools implement their distance learning programs this year. And we just don't know. So this coming fall's distance learning is not going to be the same as last spring's distance learning. So how schools implement that plan this coming fall, we need to see whether clubs get integrated in or other competitions get integrated in. And if so, then those athletes need to jump into other academic things or community service things in order to, like take over some of that time. But for athletes, it's a tough year, and I can feel the pain for sure.
So kind of hopping back into the ACT, SAT, what is the score range for someone to decide whether they should or shouldn't send it in?
Yeah, so this is it totally depends on which school you're applying to and the specific students. So I would again go back to your school's Naviance data. So just to maybe give a little bit of background, most high schools have a software platform that holds all that specific school's college admission trend data. And so what it is that I believe Jocelyn goes to Amador Valley, correct? And so I'm like 99% sure Amador Valley has a Naviance. What I would do is that I would go into, I would take a look at that Naviance data, and I would see what the average entry test score is for the school that you're looking at. And it's gonna be different for every school. So Harvard and Stanford, average admit SAT is gonna be different than UC Santa Cruz average admit SAT. And you're going to want to factor in like the average entry test score for a student from your specific high school, not from somebody else's high school. And if you can avoid it, not from national data. You need to look at your specific high school's average entry data and then see whether you are within earshot of that score. And so I would say, without sort of applying like a very strict numerical rubric to it, but that's where you should begin. You should see whether what the average entry GPA or SAT is for the school, for the university that you're hoping to apply to, and then begin there.
Mm-hmm. What about for the current underclassmen? How do you see that this will kind of affect how they go on to do things in the future, or how will it affect the underclassmen?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you're a rising 10th or 11th grader, let's just say if you're a rising 10th grader, you got a couple years for this to everything to sort of get back to normal. And so I think if you're a rising 10th grader, hold tight, and it's okay. And you have a couple years, and continue to explore and do creative things and explore what you're interested in. I do think that with regards to testing, I think the testing landscape may change more substantially in 3 years. And so this is where the UC has declared that they are going to go test blind in 2 years. And so that may, whether that cultural shift, with the UC making that decision, how that will impact universities across the United States, I think we'll have to see. But it is an interesting cultural shift, and the UC is still the best and most popular public university system in the world. And so them making that choice is very interesting and can rock the boat for other university systems around the United States. But I think for the next 2 years, students you should still assume you're going to take the SAT or the ACT and plan as such. And I think if you're a 9th and 10th grader, You should still mentally prepare for the SAT or the ACT anyways. So, I mean, I wouldn't suggest rising 10th graders be taking a lot of practice tests now. It's not the right time for that. But you should just assume for now that you will be taking the SAT or the ACT eventually. And that's the right position to be in until any other changes are made.
Do you foresee these test scores to still be optional in the next few years?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I do feel like the test optional trend was already happening prior to 2020. So there were more and more schools that were going test optional, and a slow growing movement of schools that were going test blind. So this was already happening in the university landscape already. And truth be told, I think there are going to be a lot of schools that will maintain test optional from this point on. But I still feel like there's going to be a handful of other schools, including a lot of top schools. If the landscape becomes more normalized in 2021, they will revert back to test required. And so even Cornell has made a declaration earlier in the year that they are going test optional. However, they still believe that test scores are still reflective of a student's ability to do well in school. So they still believe in test scores, and if it normalizes, they probably will bring it back.
Right. So for the SAT and ACT, do you know if seniors will get some sort of priority in terms of registering for these?
So the SAT, as Jocelyn, as you know already, probably the registration already happened, about a month ago. So that's already been done, and seniors without test scores were given priority. The ACT, the hint is that they are going to get priority, and nobody knows a lot of details because the SAT, I feel like the SAT and the ACT, it's just been a tough year for them. The SAT and ACT also changed their CEO last month. And so there's certainly a lot of criticisms levied on both organizations this past month. And so, but they should give students who registered already and rising seniors priority on taking fall test dates for sure. So especially for the ACT. ACT, they said opens the last week of July, and tomorrow is the last week of July. So we'll look at it first thing tomorrow morning.
I'll start checking. So what about a student's art portfolio? How valuable is that?
It's valuable for a student who's applying in as an art major for a school that's requiring a portfolio. That's for sure. So, I mean, for that particular student, if you're applying into a school and it requires an art portfolio for the art major, then the art portfolio is arguably more important than test scores. So your portfolio is critical. If you're applying in as a bio major and submitting an art portfolio on the side, to be frank with you, I don't believe that it's consequential. Like, I don't believe that it really makes a huge difference, because the art portfolio does not tell the admissions reviewer whether you're going to be successful in biology. Mm-hmm. So kind of think about this in context. You're not trying to load the admissions reviewer with as much content as you can. You're trying to give them the relevant information that will tell them that you'll be successful once you arrive.
Right. So what about letters of rec? What is the weight of recommendation letters in this admissions process?
Yeah, I think with regards to rec letters, this is where, as I made mention earlier, when there's a lack of information in other areas, they have to look at other factors that are part of the applications. So I think they're going to read more closely what teachers and counselors are saying about students and really take note of that. And historically, there are few schools where the interviews really matter. MIT interviews matter, but there aren't that many of those schools in the United States. For the schools where interviews historically have not mattered much, the sense is that they are going to access more of that interview data and try to assess whether the student is a good fit. So my sense is that rec letters will be more important. Interviews will be slightly more important.
Mm-hmm. So what are your thoughts on majoring undecided or for private colleges?
Yeah, I think this is where I feel like for it certainly, generally speaking, depends which school, But my feeling on undeclared is that it's neutral. It's neither a help nor a hurt. But I think you need to consider what undeclared means in context of the years after you get into school. So if you're trying to get into a computer science department and you're trying to go undeclared in order to get the benefit of getting, maybe getting a more generous read on your application, and then you want to try to transfer into computer science, that may be very problematic because computer science is over applied for, generally speaking. So if you're trying to do that, then that may not be the best move. I would say that's not a good move, generally speaking. If you want to study computer science, you should declare computer science from the beginning, or you may find yourself in a world of hurt a couple of years down the road. But generally speaking, in the review, in a public school review, and let's just take the UC system, the undeclared application is read by the largest internal college, which in most cases is a college of letters and science, which holds like biology and economics and most of the majors that are on campus. So to me, it really is neutral. And it may be helpful for students whose activities don't tell a more clear story on your major. And then this way you can, potentially go undeclared. If your activities tell a story, whether it's a leaning towards math, towards art, towards psychology, then it does help to connect the major with your story. And I know that is much more specific with regards to which students, but that's probably where the major and the application make more sense.
So we have a pretty specific scenario from
All right.
years. A rising senior who didn't pay much attention to study with a 3.0 GPA, but finally woke up one day and had scored straight A's the last semester, but since the school got switched to pass, no pass, it didn't really count. But they plan and will score straight A's this next semester with extremely strong background in computer science and a 1400 SAT. Do they have a chance into getting into Santa Clara University?
That's tough. I would not. It's hard because like for most admissions reviewers, you kind of put yourself in their shoes. They only have what information they have on your application, right? So if up until today, the grade trend hasn't been reflective of, like, say, getting more A's and getting, and delivering like a stronger performance, then that's really all they have. And this is where, definitely that student should do as well as they can this coming fall. This is where taking an extra class, taking like AP Psychology at BYU Online might be helpful, and they might be able to get one semester of course done, by the time they get to like the early deadline. So there's a little bit of strategy that can be played with which classes you can take now and by the time the deadlines come. But to be frank with you, the 3.0, like without having this upcoming semester's grades, the 3.0 and the 1400, I think it's difficult for Santa Clara. And but I do want to give you maybe a little, perhaps that student a little bit of hope. I did have a student who generally did pretty well in 9th and 10th grade, and then did not pay much attention during 11th grade and got lots of B's and C's. And their dream school was to go to Santa Clara. He did wake up summer of after his junior year, took 2 community college classes, got 2 A's, got all A's and a B senior year, first semester, applied early decision, and they just deferred him to regular. And then on regular, they put him on the wait list. And every time there was a new grade report, so he, after first semester senior year, he says, I got all A's and a B. I also took 1 extra college course first semester senior year, and I got an A in that. And then he just kept sending them updates on, hey, I'm eager to go to Santa Clara. I'm showing performance with good grades and lots of A's. And I just want to tell you that my 11th grade was not reflective of who I am, and this is where I'm going. And then he eventually was pulled off the wait list, and they also pulled him off the wait list to be admitted into the undergraduate business school at Santa Clara, which is also a good school at Santa Clara. So keep working hard and give it your best shot, and don't give up.
Right, there's always a chance.
There's always a chance, Jocelyn. There's always a chance.
So I know a lot of schools actually did not switch to the pass and no pass. So in the college admissions process, how and will it be looked differently?
Yeah, so the schools that did not go, so okay, there's some schools who did not go pass no pass, and there's some school districts around the US that just gave straight A's, which to me is kind of ridiculous, you know. And so so the truth is that admissions people know that they cannot measure how effective a school is in going online, like going distance learning. So generally speaking, everybody's discounting second semester 11th grade, no matter whether that school was giving grades or not. And maybe it's unfair. Like, for example, I believe Harker kept grades for second semester junior year. I believe Menlo School kept grades for second semester junior year. But I believe Menlo School also said that we will not give you lower grades than you got first semester, which is also kind of strange, right? But bottom line is that every admissions reviewer is going to discount second semester junior year. So if your school went pass, don't pass, that's not your fault, and don't overstress about it.
Okay. So we have another question that says, I'm interested in applying to biotech, but there's not many chances for research projects. What should I do?
Certainly, this is where, with regards to biotech, I'll give you the student I mentioned earlier who got one of the, there's multiple first places at Synopsys, and he got one of the first places. His independent research work that he did out of his kitchen was trying to develop biodegradable plastic. And he basically just found different types of starches, potato starch, rice starch, et cetera, types of starches, and then found different, just different grades of just water, different percentages of water solubility in different starches, and just figured out the most elastic and the most malleable, like plastic-ish type material. And he did it all out of his kitchen, and figure out a way to get it done. And so I think I'm not so worried about students who are like saying, I want to do specifically bioengineering, and I need very fancy, elaborate mechanisms in order to do that. Just make do with the kind of research that you can do out of your house, and that will actually be fine. I don't think anybody's expecting anybody to have a lot of substantial lab equipment to work with. And so if you're having a lack of ideas, go to sciencebuddies.com, take a look at what they have, and then use that as inspiration to develop a project on your own at home. And you can definitely do a lot from being at home, for sure.
Yeah. So how would you advise a rising senior in regards to doing college research? What are some things we should be looking at or looking for?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, this is where you certainly can, every university is doing information sessions online, so you should jump into those. And in addition to the fact, as I mentioned earlier, about demonstrating interest, once you sign up for that information session, your email goes into their system, and they're, passively watching on some level, right? So what I would say, and I want to make a caveat to that as well. Not every school is measuring demonstrated interest, but certainly there are definitely schools out there that are measuring it. So, without sort of a lack of, if you're not sure about which school, then you should assume that they are. And so go on to information sessions online with every university. You can certainly, I try to connect, like my rising seniors with other students of ours who are at universities around the United States, try to give them like 15, 20-minute phone calls, and then give them as much information as they can. And then there are virtual online tours where you can see the campus and get a feel. I do feel like reading student reviews on sites like Niche and Unigo do help. It's like reading Amazon reviews for universities. And so you read 10 to 20 student reviews, you get an idea of what the student culture is going to be like. And that's a good way to learn about it. I know that for the foreseeable future, you will not be able to visit campuses. Campuses are generally closed right now anyways, so they won't even take you. So we're just gonna have to wait, and hopefully by the time you get your results, say like February, March of next year, then you may be able to visit and then see what school might be a good fit.
Yeah, great. What are those websites you mentioned again?
It's every university. Like I interviewed Pomona College last week. It's on their admissions website. So just go to the universities that you are thinking about applying to, and just look up. Instead of like normally, if you were to wanting to visit a school, you would search like say USC and tour, and then you can just search USC and tour, and likely it's going to take you to the page where you can sign up for a virtual online session.
Great.
With the admissions reviewer.
Okay. So what would be your suggestion in terms of applying undeclared versus for a less competitive major in school?
Undeclared versus a less competitive major. Yeah, so I feel like the major needs to match the student's story. So if you, like invariably when you apply to a college, for most private schools, you're going to have to write an essay that says, why do you want to study this major? And if it's, let's just say it's anthropology. So if you want to study anthropology, like why do you want to study anthropology? And the answer to that is not, I really like studying anthropology. I think it makes a lot of money, which it may or may not. And, but you need to anchor that essay in an experience. Like when, I had a student who did major in anthropology at UC San Diego, and he spent 3 weeks on a service trip in Guatemala. And part of his work was studying the culture of the indigenous tribe that they were working with. And he had to sort of measure their health stats and language barriers and educational opportunities. And that led him into wanting to study more about cultures and the evolution of cultures that is happening within certain people groups, thus anthropology. So you need to connect your story with your major, if at all possible.
Okay. So how important are high school freshman year grades?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the UC GPA calculation does not factor in 9th grade courses. And generally speaking, when but private schools certainly look at the entire transcript, and they certainly see 9th grade courses or 9th grade grades. And if you have a more challenging 9th grade and you did not do as well as you'd like to, my thing is that don't give up. 10th grade and 11th grade are coming. And if you do better in 10th or 11th grade, they always look at those grades more. So I would not be overly worried or concerned. Just keep doing better over continuous years. I'll give you one story. I had a student a while back in 9th and 10th grade did get more B's, a few C's. And then like this other student did sort of begin paying attention and kind of woke up, and then took 4 APs junior year, got straight A's, practiced her way up to a 1510 in the SAT, wasn't admitted to LA, wasn't admitted to UC San Diego, but was admitted to UC Berkeley. And so, and this is where her GPA, total GPA is probably like a 3.4, 3.5, but you can see that she skyrocketed the last couple of years. And I think that was, if you're UC Berkeley, then you feel more confident about whether that student will do fine once they land. Okay.
So someone else asked, just to make sure, are second semester junior grades important for colleges?
I mean, in a normal year, yes. On a normal year, no question, they're important. But this is where, for 2020, it's every second semester junior year is going to be discounted. So I wouldn't overly stress about it. Very few people have those grades. So if you didn't do well second semester junior year, then it might have been a godsend. I think for those students who did not do as well as they liked first semester junior year, then it's a little bit problematic. And so you need to make sure that you work hard first semester senior year. If you took classes over the summer at a community college this current summer, then hopefully you did well. But I think for that student who maybe got lower than what they've liked first semester junior year, then not having second semester grades is challenging.
Okay, great. We have a couple more questions.
We do, huh? All right.
If more students decide to take a gap year this year or next year, will that impact the next year's admission numbers?
That's a great question. And so this is where I've been asking this question, or people have been asking this question in all of our admission officer interviews over the last 6 months. And that was one of the first questions I asked, like the senior dean at Emory University. And he said, we've run a lot of, we have a lot of internal metrics. We know that it's not going to, fluctuate that much, and we'll be fine. Don't worry about it. But it's a week-to-week basis, and the landscape is changing, unfortunately. And I did ask Pomona College this same question last week or 2 weeks ago, and she said, I don't know. And that's probably the most honest answer. And so, to be honest with you, I think it will. How much it will, it's really hard to say. So it depends on really how many students will actually request deferral this year. I do want to say that 2 weeks ago, the deferral numbers were not much higher than a normal year, marginally higher, and it wouldn't have made an impact for next year. But since most schools are going online this coming fall, we're still waiting to see what those deferral numbers are going to come in. So if there is a substantial increase in deferral requests, then it could change 2021, if I can just be honest about it.
Okay. So what about how hard it is to get into colleges? Do you see UCs or other colleges being tougher as compared to other years?
It's tougher as compared to other years. I think it entirely there's so many moving parts and variables that I think it's hard to make a very precise prediction on whether the UCs, but I think what's in favor for California students, those of the audience who are living in California, is that there are fewer international students coming in. And I think that it inherently opens up spaces for more local and state students. However, the reality is that there's going to be more California students who are staying in state. So does that balance off what the demand and supply will be next year? It may, but generally speaking, the admission trend for in-state students has, for many of the UC campuses, has gone up a little bit. And so this is where I think for California students, I would not expect it to be more difficult next year. So the state of California has always been very focused, primarily because I think, for years back, there was a lot of bad PR, a lot of just bad press about UCs taking more out-of-state and international students. But they've done their best to try to create as much space for in-state students. So if you're a California student, I think you should feel fairly confident that it will not be more competitive than previous years. There may be more space coming up. That's possible. So.
Great. So someone just asked, do colleges really look at absences or your attendance during junior year? And does that impact their view of a student's potential? This is a question I really want to know the answer to.
Jocelyn, have you been absent quite often? What's been going on?
It was not the best.
Your attendance was not the best?
Yeah.
Should we bring your dad back on and talk about this? What do you think?
I think it's okay.
Okay, all right, fair enough. So let's answer the question, shall we? So I think absences. I don't know to what degree these absences are, but in most cases, if the absences are so it depends on the transcript, and I would say very few transcripts have an attendance number. So if that's the case, then nobody really sees anything. So the overwhelming majority of transcripts don't have that data. I don't want to say that nobody has that data, no transcript has that data. So it depends on which school you go to, but most don't have it. The other thing is that if you've been absent to such a degree where it required disciplinary action, suspension, or hopefully not expulsion in your case, Jocelyn, but yeah, then that will certainly be marked down on your record with your counselor. And then when your counselor writes the counselor report that goes onto the Common App, they likely will want to make note of that in their rec. So my thing is that if you've been absent just a little bit and it hasn't impacted much, then I wouldn't overly think about it. But if it's led to disciplinary action, then it's possible.
Okay. So before we wrap everything up, do you have any last words of advice? Because school is starting in less than a month. So any last words for the students on the call?
Yeah, I mean, I think this is where there's a lot of things that you will want to worry about, and there's so much of this that it's out of your hands. But what is in your hands? What is in your hands is doing the best you can in school, making sure that your siblings and family are taken care of. So everybody's under stress. Your parents are under stress. Everybody in the household this is a new thing for everybody. So making sure that everybody in the household is kind of has their space and well taken care of. When you have the opportunity to jump into activities, or if there's a curiosity or an activity that you've been curious about doing, this is the time to do it. So you should go for it. But don't worry about things that are beyond your control. So if you have a test reservation this fall, practice for it, give it your best shot, and then go for it. If you couldn't get a test reservation this fall, then that's not your fault. Yeah, and that will be well understood. Again, there's way more students who could not get a test reservation this fall than you think. So college reviewers have consistently said that they understand. So just work on the things you can work on, and all the other things that are out of your control, it's entirely out of your control, and don't sweat it. So.
Okay, well, that about wraps it up. Thank you so much, Alton, for taking your time and talking to us today. I bet all of us, especially me, I found it super helpful, so thank you so much. And I want to say thank you so much to everyone that joined us here today, and I hope you learned something new as well.
Thank you so much, Jocelyn, and appreciate having the opportunity to share a little bit. And certainly, if my contact information is on the end of that video. So if you want to go back onto the video, you can reach out to us there. But thank you so much. And if you want to see the admissions officer interviews, they're all up on our website as well.
Okay, great. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.